if you any of our cozy detectives have watched the second movie and know where this line is, you get extra kudo points from me. But there's a big scary character in it, and he goes, "Hello, cozy detectives, and welcome to the Blanket Fort Files. I'm Joy,
And I'm Larissa.
and we're here to report on all things comfy and cozy." Yay! Movie
I love
night
that we said that
again.
together. We're both in
I
sync. So good.
know. Habit, I think. We're always like, yay, we're here.
Yeah. And then we cut this, but at the end,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
always like, yay, we did it.
Yeah, at the very end, after we're like talking a little bit about our case file for the next week, we're always like, woohoo, we did it.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
so
so
funny. It's in so
proud.
many of them. So proud of ourselves. Look at us go. But we were talking. Okay, so I want to go back to this because I do want to hear what you were going to say. But we have to like stop ourselves from talking when we first get on here before we start recording.
Yes.
But you were talking about the Easy Bake Oven because you have a shirt that's a play on that.
Yes.
So explain.
So I wore that because you always do such a good job of like subtly dressing for the theme. And I was like, this is my chance. So it'll make sense when we talk about what the theme is. But I always say that like they don't know when they literally click on the episode title. I'm always like, oh, it
But
needs
for
to be
us, we're
this
like,
big
wait.
reveal.
That's so true.
But it is, we're talking about movies that aren't technically Halloween, but like are Halloween
Vibes.
adjacent. Yes, vibes, exactly. So I wanted my shirt to be like Halloween adjacent. So I really loved Easy Bake Oven growing up as a kid, which this is what I was saying before we started recording. And then I was like, I can't get too much into my Easy Bake Oven lore. But I think that was kind of one of the precipices for eating Gilmore, was just like this love of baking in a plastic oven with a light bulb as a child.
Okay, so here's my question with it, because I never had one.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand the concept, I guess. Are you actually baking foods that you're supposed to consume?
Yes. So basically, yeah,
Scary.
not
Plastic food.
super great. Yeah, this is the 90s. We weren't super safe back then, I guess. I don't know. But essentially what it was is you could buy little packs for different quote unquote recipes, and it would just be like the mix, like Betty Crocker cake mix, but like for Easy Bake. So you would take the little powder and usually just mix it with water or oil, like weren't adding eggs or anything, and then you would spray. It was like this little metal circular tray, and you would spray that down with the cooking spray, and then pour the batter in, and you literally would stick. So you had this plastic like arm thingy that would push the tray into the oven, and it would sit under literally just a light bulb. That is what was cooking this food. And so it would sit there for like 20-30 minutes baking under a light bulb, and it
was in there for a minute.
Yeah, or maybe not even that long. I feel like that you had to do it that long for it to be safe, but like it was a while. And then you would have to like carefully pull it out, and it was so literally like the plastic arm. I'll have to see if I can find a picture of the old ones, but it literally just kind of didn't even fully wrap around the metal tin.
And it didn't like click on.
Yeah, so you would kind of have to like pull it, and then you couldn't touch it because then you'd burn yourself, but you kind of have to get it all the way out. It was this mess. And then you would have this like mostly baked kind of
half baked
dough,
yeah
little like mini cake. Like it was literally like this size. But I got so into it because like I loved watching cooking shows too growing up. So we would get like, you know, that like food coloring gel like you could write on your cakes. I would get that and make little designs on my plate, and then I would go out in the backyard and like pick leaves for like the presentation.
Oh, that's so cute.
I was
you added like a little accoutrement.
Yeah.
That's so cute. Did they have different, so you said there was different sets that you could pick from. Did you have a favorite set that was your favorite set?
Oh, I honestly don't even remember I don't even remember the flavors. Like I would have to look it up. I think most of them were pretty basic, just like chocolate, vanilla. But I want to say that there was like brand sponsored ones, like maybe
that makes sense.
Like Reese's did one or something. I don't know. I'd have to look it up because I haven't really thought about Easy Bake. I saw this on TikTok and like this summer and just got so excited because I was perfect. Like, this was my childhood.
The closest I had to that was, do you remember those little tiny gummy either pizzas
Oh,
or
yes.
hamburgers? I
Mhm.
remember the hamburger, but I remember even as a kid, and I don't know if I just have extra sensitive teeth or if they really were this rubbery, but I remember trying to like stack it and bite it, and it
Oh,
would be like,
yeah. So
"Argh."
hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were not easy to chew for sure.
Then you're like just eating on like quote unquote lettuce or like just the burger because we
Right.
can't actually make the whole thing to eat
And
it.
then we had all of
So
that wax candy too. Do you remember
I
like the
never, ugh, like the
yeah,
Coke bottles.
yeah, that was the one I was gonna mention was like this mysterious liquid and literally a wax
Yeah,
bottle. Like what were we doing?
I know. Actually, that transitions pretty perfectly into us talking about our case files. But
Yes.
I do want to, we have some extra tips at the end that we'll talk about. We'll get a little bit more into more stories. I believe it's next week, even, which is
Mhm.
crazy already. But I remember never loving those candies because I feel like I didn't trick or treat, but we did like trunk or treat type things, and those were always like the cheapest candies. And I never
Yeah.
loved the Coke bottle candies. Did you like them as a kid? And now you're like, no,
No.
thank you, or
No, I didn't like any of those. Like I did do like full trick or treating around the neighborhood and I just kind of feel like I had a system of these were ones I liked, these were ones I didn't. And there would be
yeah.
those weird toffees that would always be a pass. I
Hmm.
never liked, I think they were called like sugar baby, sugar daddy, which is
I
now
never
is
liked those
now
either.
thinking about it, that's kind of an odd name for a children's candy.
Yeah. Also, is it a chicken or egg scenario? Because did that phrase come before that candy, or they were like, just like someone was like, I love this candy. Now this is this phrase, and I'm like,
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
didn't like it either way.
I feel like the phrase was first, but someone was like, "Oh,
Oh.
that'll make a good candy," which I don't
Ugh.
know why.
No
That's so
thanks.
strange.
Pass.
And then there was like any I like sweet tarts, but I didn't ever really like the
Mm.
Smarties or any of those like
Remember those
tablety type of.
Neckos?
Mm,
Weren't those Neckos those like big tubes of like this
yes,
chonker
I
size?
never really liked those. They always taste like chalk to
No.
me.
They really do. Yes. Any of the ones I also didn't like because the thing that you were supposed to do, I guess, that I feel like was not explained to kids, specifically again with those Coke bottles, is you're supposed to like rip it off, not eat that, and then have the like liquid inside. And I feel like every kid just ate the
The wax.
wax.
Yeah, and then there was wax
What are we
lips
doing?
too, like, that was a whole thing.
I forgot about
We
those.
were just
I
strange.
know.
We had
I
strange
know.
things.
We were just living. I every time there was I always think of that with Dollar Tree, and instead of going to the candy, I always went to the body glitter. I was like, I will glitter
Yes.
everything. So that's like the wax bottle Cokes and that whole era of candies plus body glitter is just combined in my mind.
I love it. No, and
So funny.
then body glitter is always scented too, like, that had, like, some
Mm,
fruity.
a lot of what is it called? Like vanilla based
Yes,
things.
which I can't do now because of that. Like, I used to really love, I
I'm
think
very picky.
specifically Bath and Body Works, it was like warm vanilla
Yes.
sugar. That was like the
Yeah.
scent. And I loved that as a kid, but now because it was like I just associate that with like after gym class of like
Mm, valid. Oh my word, so
yeah, and
valid.
that one
I wonder
and
what the new Axe is like because remember that Axe spray that all like the
oh
boys would be like, I
yeah,
smell. Now let me smell like I have this on top of my smell. It like never got actually rid of the smell
right.
of gym class. I wonder if there is a new version of that or if that just
I
was
think
an
it
era and a time.
I don't know. I feel like they still wear it because I work in high schools, and so
Whoa.
sometimes if you go down like freshman hallways, it's
Ugh.
still yeah,
Little 13-year-olds
yeah,
just spraying themselves all kinds of nasty smells.
yeah.
Oh, that's so true. Good times, good times. But today we're gonna actually have our own little. We've had like quite a few different movie nights, but this one's fun because I haven't seen yours, and I don't think you've seen mine
No, I
either, right?
haven't. Which
Ooh.
I I feel like it's been a bit since we've done. Well, I guess last week with the books, it was one I hadn't read and you hadn't
Hmm.
read, but and specifically for movies, I don't know if we've done one in a while that both of us haven't seen the others. So I'm very excited.
I am very excited. This is one of my favorite comfort rewatch movies. And so I forget. I don't want to take over. Am I first or are you first?
You are first this week.
Okay. Okay. Okay, we're just going to get into it. So this is not, I wouldn't say this is a, once again, with the theming of it, this is not a specific Halloween movie. It actually even came out in May,
Hmm.
which is surprising. So it was kind of like a pre-summer release.
Yeah.
Came out in 1999, and it is The Mummy. So excited. So I am going to mainly talk about the first movie. There is a second movie called The Mummy Returns, which I also love. This is one of the few times where, again, in a two movie back to back, I think it's really hard to make the second movie as good as the first. This
Right.
one I actually really enjoy both of them, and I could really rewatch both. Now there is a third one, which I'm not even
Hmm.
going to lie to you, I have not seen
Fair.
because not all of the actors came back, and that's something for me that kind of kicks me out of the world of it. If you're like, this is Evie, and it's like
No, you're
clearly
not.
not Rachel Wise.
Right.
Yeah, I'm like, no, you're not. You don't even go here. So the Mummy came out in 1999. It is a somewhat remake of a 1930s movie also about the mummy. Both of them are Universal, which somehow in my brain, I don't know how I didn't realize this because there's a ride at Universal Studios called The Mummy based upon the movie. And
Oh,
so I don't know how, I guess I just thought that they had gotten the rights to it versus this was a Universal movie.
that's funny.
But I know, right? I'm like, oh, okay, well, duh, that makes way more sense. So what it is about is the two main characters are Rick O'Connell, which is, I just love this man, Brendan Fraser, and then Rachel Wise plays Evie. Evie is somebody who is she has a very famous line that goes, "I am a librarian." So she just loves the ancient Egypt culture of things. It is
Mm.
set in the 20s, but it is about more so like the, I don't know how to say this right, the 1200s. Is that how you say it? 1290-ish BC is
Oh,
the era
wow.
that they're kind of referencing back to.
Yeah.
But this story is based in the late 20s era of it. So it is kind of a timepiece
Yeah, I don't
also.
think I realized. I think just based on, because I haven't even really seen clips of it, just I guess my
Mm,
assumption was that it was like set in the 90s. Like, obviously, I knew
right?
it related back to ancient Egypt because of mummies, but I don't think I realized that it was set in the 20s. That's very interesting.
It is. It's very fun too because Rick O'Connell is an American, but he is currently in the French Foreign Legion. So he's serving in the French Foreign Legion. And then Evie is British and she's British Museum, but they kind of collide worlds in Egypt itself, but it was filmed in like Morocco era, so or area. So I really like that the sets themselves really feel like you're there.
Mm-hmm.
Also, have you seen The Matrix?
Actually, no.
Oh,
I've seen
okay.
I've seen clips and I know enough about it to know to get by, but no, I don't know. I feel like I missed out on a lot of 90s action movies just
Hmm.
because as a kid I still watch mostly like kid content, so that would have been like too adult for me.
Gotcha,
And I
gotcha.
was a little scaredy cat when I was a kid. I still am. Like, I can't do horror movies at all, and not that
Me
these are
neither.
horror, but anything kind of remotely a little scary or actiony as a kid, I just didn't do. I The only one really that like stands out to me, and I know this is one you haven't seen, was Titanic,
Mhm.
and that was in the 90s, but I
Oh yeah, I
didn't
have
really
not seen that.
watch that probably until about middle school, and then got really obsessed in high school, and so that was like more early 2000s when I actually
Mm.
saw it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me because I feel like also I don't remember the exact time that I like first watched this. I don't have a specific memory of it, but it is a definite rewatch for me pretty consistently. Um, because what they basically do is they accidentally, well, not accidentally, they are reading this book, but they don't realize that by reading this book, they will awaken the mummy. And so they
Mm.
basically bring back this mummy. And it's really funny because Brendan Fraser has a quote about how the mummy's just kind of looking for his lost girlfriend, and I'm just trying to make him go back to sleep. It's just like, that's
Aw.
such a him quote about it. But they awaken this mummy, and then they're trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we like stop him? Because he has to. It's kind of horrorish, but I wouldn't say it's like, it's not bloody gore horror. It's more like dry, dusty mummy, but not like bandaged up mummy. They were very specific about that, and they
Mhm.
didn't want the look of the mummy to feel like what you would think of in the 1930s, just kind of bandaged, wrapped up mummy. So the mummy has to, I don't know, I guess consume, kill, one of those scary words, the different people that opened this one box. So he's trying to do that. They're trying to stop him at the very end. Like the last thing that he must do to become a full-fledged like human being again is the character of Rachel Wise, Evie, he has to like sacrifice her, quote unquote. And so there is a lot of elements in it that feel very Halloween horror, even just like the mummy itself. In the second movie, it is 10 years in the future. And there is a small spoiler. Are you okay with a small spoiler?
Yeah, it's fine.
Small slash big spoiler that everybody saw coming. The obviously like the two main characters they get together at the very
Mhm.
end.
I
Woohoo!
would guess that
Um,
anyways. So,
Right. And so in this one, they have a kid. And it's actually really cute because I didn't know this somehow. I don't know why I thought just like this little actor was pretending to be British, but I think he actually is British.
hmm.
And there's a line from it that is such a throwaway line, but I've been seeing all these videos pop up about like what's a line from like an obscure movie that you quote all the time. And there's one line. If you any of our cozy detectives have watched the second movie and know where this line is, you get extra kudo points from me. But there's a big scary character in it, and he goes, "Give it to me now." And I just say that all the time. It like makes no sense. It like it's such a throwaway line, but just the way that the actor said it made me laugh so hard.
Well, we
But
have
anyway, back to
we have so many of those too. Like I
yeah.
and it's ones too that are just for the most random things ever and we say all the time. And I'm like, if someone were just to sit in our apartment and just like observe us, we'd be like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Have you seen the one? This is off topic, but then I'll jump back to the first movie. But the one where it's the storage wars one where he goes, "Watch your profanity." Have you
No, I
seen
have
that line?
not. I
Oh,
love that
so
though.
it's so. I'll just send it to you because he says it in such a high pitched voice, which I don't think he talks like that in any other part of the show. But I died when I saw that.
Oh, I have to
How?
tell you a new one that we just added to
Yeah.
like our repertoire. And so I live with my sister and we've been going through our like Halloween fall movie list and we have
Mm.
this one Scooby-Doo movie that she wanted to watch and it's with this all girl band. I don't know if you remember that one. And they call themselves eco goth, which I never heard outside of them. It was so strange. But they were like at one point, because they're supposed to be kind of like bad girls, but they tell each other, they're like, bad dreams, sisters. So now every night we're like, bad dreams, sister.
That's so fun. I love like the random parts of stuff that we just like grasp
Hold on
onto.
to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, but back to the first mummy. That was a side tangent, but we love it.
Love it.
But the mummy himself is trying to basically reunite with his love. Anaxuna Moon is her name. And so that's like his goal is to become like whole again and then have her come back. And then they're just supposed to be this big happy family, quote unquote. But it's very interesting because when the actors have talked about the movie itself, I feel like they were kind of unsure like, are we creating a horror movie? Is it a romance
Oh no.
movie? Is it a time period movie?
It's kind
And
of
I
all of
think
both.
it is kind of all of both because when trying to think of like the genre of what this movie would be, it's very interesting to me. I didn't know it came out in like May. That feels like it should have come out now, like in like
Right.
October-ish time period for what the movie is. Um, there's also all of these other fun, quirky characters in both the first and the second movies that are coming in. She has a brother who's kind of the like quote unquote like deadbeat brother who's kind of one of the comedic reliefs of the movie because he is kind of bumbling through life and things like that. There's a magi, I don't know how to say that right, but character in it as well, who's more of the serious character, but the actor is hilarious. And there's a behind the scenes of it where they wouldn't let him, he's supposed to be on this horse and they wouldn't let him ride away on the horse. I don't know if they just thought he was going to fall off or if it was like an insurance thing or something, but he was basically standing on a bunch of apple boxes. And then when they said action, he had to like pretend to be on the horse. Like he like basically sat on the
Oh
horse for
no.
his line. And then when he was supposed to like go away and just ride off into the sunset for that scene, they had him get off and the stunt guy come in.
Oh.
But I know, it's like, oh, poor guy. But one of the things about this movie that for me, I guess makes it hold up is the amount, which is why I was talking about the Matrix earlier, is the amount of detail in time and the CGI, I feel like really holds up even nowadays. It doesn't feel goofy to me. Like there's
Mhm.
probably one or two different parts depending on how, I guess, rebuilt, quote unquote, the mummy is. Because he kind of starts as a skeleton and then he kind of like slowly gains back, not humanity, but different parts of skin and stuff like that. It's not, it
Mhm.
sounds more gory than I remember it being, but also it is kind of scary. So I wouldn't watch this if I was a kid. I feel like I
Mhm.
watched this maybe in my teens, maybe when the second movie came out is when I
Mhm.
kind of popped into the genre of it. But they would spend, I looked at the behind the scenes of the CGI of the mummy character, and they went all the way down to the skeleton of the CGI
Oh,
and then
wow.
built up from there to the point where even like if your hand is moving back and forth, they made all of the muscles and tried to connect them correctly. They spent like 2 or 3 months just doing the
Wow.
muscles of the mummy. And I feel like because they spent so much time doing that and were so detail oriented on that, I feel like is another reason that it holds up versus, unfortunately, there's things where even in the 2010s, if they were created, I still don't feel like that CGI holds up now because of potentially, in my opinion, this is just Joy's opinion, but how quickly we are cycling through movies and they just didn't
Mhm.
have those 3 4 months to put
To really
into
work on it.
connecting, quote unquote, the muscles of a CGI character.
Yeah.
So
Well, I also
I thought it was really
feel
cool.
too, because not to sound like an old person, but we just let computers do so much of it now, where that
Mm,
I feel like a lot of times in movies we lose that, I guess, art aspect of
yeah.
special effects, because even with, and this, industry still exists, but I feel like it's less and less where people would do prosthetics and makeup and all of that, whereas so
Hmm.
much of it now is just, oh, we'll do it in post and we'll just have, the computer, the AI do it. And I feel like without that human element of it, it doesn't look
Absolutely.
as realistic as it used to.
And the thing I feel like they did really well in this is one, they were, I guess, quote unquote, on set because the actors were talking about during the daytime in the desert there, it was 140 degrees
Oof.
Fahrenheit. So it was really hot during the day.
Wow.
And so they're in there, they're in the elements. So it feels more real coming across the screen. It is also filmed on film, which I feel like does just in general make things feel a little bit more real, a little bit less computerized versus filming it on digital.
Mhm.
And then just what you were saying that they did. So some of it was like the mummy guys in prosthetics doing certain things. So there's different mummy characters. Like there's the mummy, but then there's soldier mummies. There's like warrior mummies. There's different types of mummies that can kind of pop up depending on if the mummy himself is creating his army. I'm getting maybe
Oh.
too detailed into it,
No, I love it.
but but they would do some of it with people and they would do some of it with CGI because they were talking about how when the warrior mummies are walking, those are guys in all of the garb. But obviously, if they're like going to crawl on the walls or something like that's CGI. And I feel like that combination, like you were saying, keeps that human element in it. And then one of the things they did, which I don't know if they do in every movie, I guess this is probably like the first kind of quote unquote horror movie that I've really looked at the details of in this type of a way. But what they did is they created 3D models of the mummy himself so that when they were on the computer, because it's, I guess, two different departments, but when the department that was creating it on the computer had it, they had the physical model to see how different like lights were hitting it depending on the angle. And I
Yeah.
thought that that just was so good because obviously, if you're standing in the dark versus standing in the daylight, it's going to look different. And I think that's also something where it can disconnect and look more goofy than scary. And I think they do
Right.
a really good job at the mummy looking really scary in this. Like, I don't think he looks goofy at all. There's some other mummies that are kind of more goofy. Um, but his character, the mummy,
Mhm.
he's pretty intense. His name is actually Imhotep. I don't know why I keep calling him the mummy, but the movie's called a mummy.
Yeah,
So,
it connects. It's so interesting too, and why I love just kind of like of course, I'm going to love the concept of our podcast, but what I think is so cool about it is that, this could be classified as a horror, or if it's
yeah.
about mummy, then it's kind of scary. But because of just your relationship to it, they're like, you find it cozy just because of the nostalgia
Yeah.
and the rewatchability. So
Yeah.
I think that's really cool, because like what is cozy to me may not be cozy to you. What's cozy to you may not be to me. But I think our cozy detectives can find something that's, oh yeah, that's also cozy to me. Or maybe they're like,
Yeah.
A
new to me,
mummy's
or maybe it's
cozy,
no thank you.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
there's always
know.
gonna be something for someone, so hopefully our cozy detectives
I
will like us.
know, right? It's so funny that you were talking about the easy bake oven, because I feel like for me, this is one of the movies that really kind of sparked like my love for Egypt, because Evie is a librarian, but she loves that like really ancient Egyptian culture.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's something that's very interesting to me too as a person. So it's funny that you just kind of were talking about that with the easy bake oven, because I feel like, yeah, that's something for me that kind of was sparked through
Yeah.
movies. And I feel like
I've
that's the best thing of movies.
I've seen, different memes about this where it was like every teenage girl was either obsessed with ancient Egypt, Greek mythology, or like the Victorian or Tudor, like British Empire.
Oh,
Like
oh, that's
everyone
so
had
funny.
like their obsession that they were like, I'm gonna learn everything about this.
So wait, wait, which one's yours?
The Greek mythology one for sure. I have, because
Ooh.
when we were trying to figure out, because you really wanted to talk about the mummy, and we were like trying to figure out a theme for it because I didn't have anything Egypt related. I had this book and we had to read it for my fifth grade. It was like not quite English class, but I guess like language arts class. Not to go off on a side tangent and like co-opt your case file.
No, you're fine.
But
I'm
I
basically
may
done.
have to do a case file on it at some point because again, it's one of those
Yeah.
where it's not necessarily cozy, but it's so nostalgic for me. But it's called
Yeah.
The Delaire's Book of Greek Myths, and it's this like beautiful artwork, just about different, Zeus and Hercules and all of like
Cool.
those things. And so I wouldn't say I was like obsessed as some people definitely can be, but I think it was something that I always enjoyed learning about. But yeah, I feel like every girl had some sort of obsession in like middle school of ancient times or something.
Right? I know. It's just like so fun to watch and look at. And I haven't had the opportunity to go to Egypt, but I have. I mean, this is not the same thing, but in the Met in New York, there is an Egypt
Oh,
section.
yes. I know exactly what
And
you're talking about.
it's so cool. I spent
Hmm.
so long in there. It's just, I just love seeing all the artifacts. And it's wild to me that you can find like jars that still have honey in them or stuff like that, or jars that still have like flour you can make into bread and it actually works as a loaf and it's not like crazy spoiled or gross or something. That's just wild to me.
Right.
Now there's the dark side of it, which I don't love, of like, why you got to keep people's organs in jars? I don't know.
Yeah. And just
I don't
like
quite get that.
taking,
But
artifacts that don't belong to us, but I
yeah.
do
Oh,
love
yeah, that
learning
too.
about it. So,
Yeah, yeah. But that's the main aspect of it. I feel like the story itself is grounded around the fact that O'Connell and Evie are growing closer. It's really cute to see their relationship grow. I really like, she kind of has an innocence kind of in the first movie because obviously she's never come in contact with the mummy before. But it's interesting to see her growth by the second movie where she's more, I got, like, obviously that was her only movie that she's awoken from the dead, but she just still loves the culture and she's really into it. But also at one point at the beginning of the second movie, she kind of like this snake's just kind of in her way and she kind of moves it with her foot, which I
mhm.
can't see first movie Evie doing. So she's clearly more, I don't know, like seeing things and seeing the world a little bit less innocent than the first movie. She's got a 10-year-old now, or just about 10. I don't remember his exact age in the second movie. And I feel like both of them in tandem or separately can work really well, which I think is another thing that's kind of hard to do in movies. Again, I haven't seen the third one. Oh, also The Rock is in the second one.
He's in
So random. I
everything.
know.
Oh my
He
gosh,
had a spin-off movie that I also never saw.
Lord.
So it's the Scorpion King. I don't know if you ever heard of
I
that
have not.
one.
But honestly, I'm not
Yeah.
surprised. Like, I feel like The Rock is probably our generation's Kevin Bacon with like the 6 degrees of The
That's
Rock.
so true. Oh my word, that's hilarious. I've never thought of that, but that is so true.
I always
Yeah,
love
that's my
that
funny little
picture.
anecdote.
People sometimes would
Kevin
dress up as though we
Hart.
would have like meme day at school with his like black sweater and the
Oh,
fanny
love.
pack. It's so iconic.
Love. I thought you were talking about the joke that Kevin Hart does. I don't remember who the other guy was, but it was The Rock and another guy that's like just as big as The Rock, and they like they did like the like high like tap on the back thing, and
Hmm.
Kevin Hart made a joke about how he's like, I just disappeared when you guys hugged.
Oh
So funny.
no.
I know. It's like, oh, yep, you kind of did. You kind of did. It's okay. But so that's the mummy. That's the basically also the reasons why I find it cozy, because of all the things I said. but I really enjoy it. I watched it around this time of year. I kind of watch it whenever I feel like because it's just fun for me, and it makes
Yeah.
more sense to me now that like I don't feel like it's specifically Halloween, but it also doesn't make sense to me that it came out in May. So it's kind of both sides of it,
Yeah,
but
do what you gotta do. Because mine also, again, like it's our whole thing. Mine isn't technically a Halloween movie either. I don't know what month it came out, but I also always watch it this time of year just because it has those vibes.
yeah, okay. I want to hear all about it because I don't know anything about this movie at all. So very similar.
So my case file is Matilda. And I did talk about it a little bit in our 90s moms episode because the teacher in this movie was my number one because I just love her so much. But this is a 1996 film that was based on a book written by Ronald Dahl. So you may have heard of like Super Fudge and all of those books. So he writes a lot of children's chapter books, but also picture books. And that book was published in 1988. And they have since made a musical based on the movie and book that came out at the very end of 2010. And then there was a film adaptation of that musical that came out in 2022.
Oh, I somehow totally missed that one.
It has Emma Thompson as the mean head mistress of the school, which we'll get into. But
Oh,
yeah, she was
interesting.
in it. So it's one of those things. I feel like we've had a couple of those where it's like multi-layered thing, all these
Yeah.
adaptations. So this is definitely a beloved franchise. But it stars Mara Wilson as Matilda, our main character. And she is a young girl who was adopted as a baby by like the worst family ever. Like it's one of those things where it's definitely very cliche and like almost cartoony, stereotypical, but the family is the Wormwoods, and it's Harry, who is the dad, played by Danny DeVito, who is also the director of the movie. And then the mom is Zinnia, played by Ray Perlman, and they were at the time married in real life. I think they're still technically married, they're just separated, but they're
Mm.
very good friends now, even still. And then they have a son, Michael. So Matilda has an older brother.
Oh.
And they basically are just kind of like slimy bad people. They watch TV all the time and they force Matilda to watch TV. The dad is this like slimy used car salesman who will sell like he basically will like super glue a bumper back onto the car, and there's like a scene where he uses a drill to roll back the mileage on the speedometer. Just like he's just like a bad
He's just
person.
like that is very caricature of like the bad guy to show the difference between the
Yeah.
two. Because at first, when you were talking about this in the 90s moms, I thought the 90s mom was her mom. I got so confused at the beginning. It makes a
No,
little bit
that's
more
okay.
sense to me now,
Yeah.
but
Well,
it what
we'll
was
get
it
into it.
90s?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
96.
96. Okay.
So, and this, I mean, this is a kids movie, so it's definitely has those like cartoony, whimsical moments, but it's one that has really held up for me. And I'll get into kind of why I find it cozy and why I can still watch it every year. Um, but essentially, Matilda, as she grows up, like when she's 2, she teaches herself how to read, and she walks to the library every day because her mom leaves to go play bingo all day. So Matilda's just at the house by herself. So she gets her little,
Scary.
yeah, she gets her little wagon and walks to the library to buy a bunch of books and just like
Oh.
reads all of the time. So she becomes really, really, really smart. Like she's can do advanced math and everything because she just reads all of the time. And that's part of the conflict of they're like, well, you need to be normal and watch TV. And she's like, I want to read. Um, which I just love in a kids movie because, you know, that encouragement of loving to learn and loving reading, I think
Yeah.
we didn't always get. I feel like in the 90s, for the most part, we did. We had a lot of educational content. Like I know we recently talked about Carmen Sandiego. So there was definitely a lot of conversation about learning and reading, but anytime that was included, I always really enjoyed that. Um, So Matilda really wants to go to school. Like that's because she loves to learn. And so her dad has a customer at his car shop. Um, Agatha Trunchbull is her name. We get just like really like
Whoa.
cartoony bad
Yeah.
name. Um, and she is the head mistress of this school. I am Crenshaw Hall Elementary. Again, just
These
very
names.
like
Yeah.
seems very evil. So kind of the exchange is Harry will send Matilda to the school in exchange for the car. And the headmistress, Miss Trunchbull, is like even worse than the family. Like she has this thing in her office called the chokey, and it's this
What a bad
closet.
name.
Yeah, there. It's basically a closet with like knives sticking in, and it's all dark and damp. And like, if the kid misbehaves, they have to go spend time in the chokey, and it's like this like tight space. Yeah, it's not good. And
Ooh.
I watched an interview while I was doing research on this. So they had Matilda goes in it at one point, and when her teacher lets her out, there's like kind of like smoke effects that come out. And Mara Wilson is like covering her nose, and she said it looks like Matilda's just scared in the movie, but it's because it smelled so bad in there because of what they were using to make
The
the smoke
fog.
effect.
Ooh.
Yeah, she said it smelled like rotten eggs.
Oh, like sulfur something
Yeah.
something. Mm.
So it's just like a bad school. So Matilda is getting it at home, she's getting it at school, but there are these like pockets of joy at the school. So Miss Honey, who was my 90s mom, and this is, it does get into a little bit of a spoiler, but she ends up adopting Matilda at the end. So she does officially become her mom. So that's why she was on my 90s mom list. But Miss Honey is just like the best teacher. She's very kind. Like she has all these like colorful posters up in her room. She has really pretty like floral dresses she wears, and she's just like very kind. And she recognizes that Matilda's really smart, and she tries to convince the Wormwoods to let her skip some grades so she can be a little bit more academically challenged. So, and then she also makes friends at the school. Like Lavender is becomes Matilda's friend, and then Amanda is another one of the little girls. And so they all kind of band together because they're at this like abusive school,
Yeah. Oh,
but
scary.
they still just like kind of have fun together, and they love learning, and they like find a little newt in the nearby creek, and that becomes like the class pet. It's just very cute. And so through all of this, Matilda realizes she has these like telekinetic powers and can like move things with her mind. And so like there's some fun scenes of her like making cereal like with her mind, and she like pours the cereal and the milk in. Um,
Is there something with a door and a cake? I feel like I probably asked this previously, but like
yeah.
the only way I watch this movie is through you that one time. So I'm like, did I ask the thing about the cake? Because I feel like that's the like reel or TikTok that
That
I've
you've
seen.
seen.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
So there is, I'm not quite sure with the door, but the cake, there is a kid named Bruce, and he um, has like a bite of Trunchbull's cake. So she gets the whole school in like
Mm.
the auditorium, and she brings out this like massive chocolate cake. It's like probably like a foot long. Like it's so big.
Ugh.
And she makes him eat the whole cake in front of the school. And
Oh,
like,
she's the worst.
yeah. But then everyone like cheers for him, and he manages to
Oh.
finish, and it's like, yay, Bruce.
Cute.
So yes, there's the chocolate seed. And it's so funny too because it's like they make a chocolate cake look so unappetizing, because like the cook is like gross and like wipes her like snot with her hand, and she's
Ew.
all sweaty, and like the frosting just like looks so overly rich, and when you're like thinking about him eating this whole cake, you're
Ooh.
like, oh, this does not look good, but it's a chocolate
Ooh.
cake, but they made it look so unappetizing. um so, and you find out in the movie, again, a little spoiler, that Miss Honey is actually Miss Trunchbull's niece. And basically adopted her when her parents died. So she and Miss Trunchbull go way back and had to endure kind of her as a guardian as well, and now as a boss. So they kind of all rally together to like overthrow Miss Trunchbull at the end. And then Miss Honey ends up like taking over the school and turning it into like a happy, safe space
Nice.
for kids. So it ends really well.
Nice.
Um, so that is essentially the premise. And I talked about this on our 90s Mom episode, but that was months ago. So you may not remember this. And if anyone didn't listen to that episode, I did want to share kind of some behind the scenes, specifically about Danny DeVito and Mara Wilson, the main character. So while filming, Mara's mom had cancer. And so Danny and Ray would essentially take Mara in and like would distract her, and they would have her over for movie nights just to keep her, you know, like busy and
Yeah.
preoccupied. And so kind of like became her like real life parents for a time while they were, I think did I freeze?
No.
Oh, okay. Maybe it was just you. So they kind of became like her real parents while her mom was dealing with that. And unfortunately, her mom did pass away right as the movie was wrapping up. But before that happened, Danny DeVito brought a tape of the movie for her to see, and they dedicated the movie to her. So I just thought that was really
Aw.
sweet because while on camera, they're awful in real life, that they were super, super kind to her. And then kind of adding to that, in watching some of these interviews, it seemed like he also incorporated that like in the filming process. So there's a scene where Matilda kind of dances around the house by herself, and Mara was really nervous about doing that. She's like, I can't dance. So Danny made like all of the cast and crew dance with her so she wouldn't feel alone. And I
Aw.
was like, oh,
That's so
that's so sweet.
cute.
And then there's a scene where her brother Michael is like throwing carrots at her, and so this is like when she's learning to control her like mind power. So she like the carrot's about to hit her, she stops it and then like turns it to shoot it back, and it goes. And so basically to get it to look like she was like concentrating on the carrot, Danny had a little carrot on a stick that he would like fly around, and he just made these fun little like sound effects while they were filming, and it was just like
Aw.
really cute. And she also said that every day, like when she got to set, he would give her a hug, and I was like, my heart.
That's really nice because I feel like there's a lot of sets for kids that cannot feel
Yeah, they
healthy,
have really
and
bad stories.
yeah, and it feels like this was one like the exact opposite of all of those stories. So it's just
Mhm.
nice to hear that that also existed too, you know?
Yeah, that there were some good moments. And
Yeah.
Mara has spoken fairly recently. This was kind of a while ago now, but just about being a child actress and
Mm,
how difficult
it's
that was.
hard.
Yeah,
I can
but
imagine.
everything that she has said about this experience was really good and kind. Um, and so, just a little bit also about the book, too, because I found out that it was actually one of Mara's favorite books growing up. So, when she got the part, she
Cute.
was like super excited to accept it, kind of like when I was talking about Harry the Spy and Rosie O'Donnell.
Yeah.
Um, but in the book, her powers essentially go away because she moves up to a higher grade. And so when she gets more
Mm.
academically challenged and she's happy, they kind of go away. But in the movie, she keeps them and they just kind of uses it for fun more so.
Mm.
And then a couple other little things about who were considered for some of the roles. So Mary Kate and Ashley were considered for Matilda, but they were working on It Takes Two. And then
Oh.
this one really made me happy, but also sad, but I still loved who we ended up getting. But Rosie O'Donnell was considered for Miss Honey, but this is when she was working on Harriet the Spy. So she had to
That's
turn it
crazy.
down. So I just thought, I
Aw.
was like, man, we could have gotten her as Miss Honey because it's kind of a similar role to Golly in that movie. But I think the Miss Honey that we got, it just ended up being really perfect. But I find this movie cozy again, just for those lessons of, again, even though it's very like caricature-y, like you said, there's these messages of hope for things that will get better. So I think this is a really good movie for kids who maybe are in abusive situations or not so great situations, that they can see this and have some hope that their situation can get better. And there's a little cottage that Miss Honey lives in that's
Cute.
very just like cozy and cute. And just like the love of reading that Matilda has,
Mm.
and just that acceptance of, being intelligent is okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a movie I watch almost every year around this time.
Cute. And did it come out on like a Disney Channel or was it like a Nickelodeon or something?
No,
Or
it was by Sony, was kind of like the head. My notes say it was produced by TriStar Pictures. So
oh, I have heard of that before. It's so hard because at the beginning of movies, they always have those pop ups, and I feel
there's
like
like
half the
four or
time I see
five.
it and half the time I
Mhm.
zone it out. Yeah. So I'm like, I feel like I vaguely remember that, but I don't
Yeah,
know.
that
Oh,
is
that's so
Matilda.
cute. Very fun. I feel like these again. I mean, that's the point of this episode, but like they are good movies to watch around this time, but aren't specifically focused around this time, which is kind of nice because I feel like sometimes they can just feel overwhelming or the list can be too long or the list if it's like if you do love horror movies, I feel like that would fatigue me. I'd be like,
Right.
okay, I need something a little bit lighter, but if you want the same kind of genre, these would be good ones. So
Yeah, I like
very
it
fun.
because, not that I don't like, I love practical magic and Hocus Pocus and all that, but it's kind of the
Mm.
same story or the same vibe. And so I like
Yeah.
adding in other movies that go along with feeling like Halloween, but aren't. And then if you wanted to watch it outside of this time of year, it would make sense too.
Yeah, yeah. And then we have multiple other sections of this. I feel like we're just like expanding upon our
I know all our
repertoire.
segments. Fun.
So our next segment is some cozy Halloween tips. Some of these are more specific. Some of these are going to kind of connect to next week, but kind of not connect to next week. So, Larissa, do you want to tell us some of your Halloween tips?
Yes. So we wanted to kind of in our back to school where they could apply if you go to school. So some of these you could do maybe on Halloween night if you didn't want to go out and do quote unquote trick or treating or a Halloween party or your haunted house. Like if you just want in home cozy vibes, which is definitely our preferred night. Um, but if you have not, which I don't know if you, maybe if you live under a rock, but if you have not had those Pillsbury cookies, the sugar cookies with, there's like a pumpkin one, or they have like, I think a black cat or a ghost, get yourself a couple packs, pop them in the oven. If you are not a baker, but want like an actual good pre-made treat, like I feel like so many of like the store bought
Mm.
cookies just don't hold up, but these, oh my gosh, they're so good. I think about them all year. And they make them for other holidays, but in my mind, I only have them in the fall because they're just, I have that
Yeah,
association.
I
So
agree.
this is your reminder, if you haven't yet, to go to the store and get yourself some Pillsbury cookies. Not sponsored, but please sponsor us, Pillsbury.
That'd be so fun. Our first sponsor is just like a huge cookie
Oh
corporation.
my
So
gosh, that'd
on
be
brand.
amazing.
Dream.
Very cozy.
One of mine was a pumpkin decorating hack that I saw. So the way that I saw it was you get those like plastic, I forget what they're called, I guess trick or treating bins, question
The
mark, is
little
that how you say it?
buckets.
Little buckets, there you go, that's the word. And you drill at the bottom of them and then you either use rope or like a zip tie, and if you have like a porch at the front you can kind of zip tie those on and put little candles in them,
Oh,
but not
fun. Like
but
the
like
tea
the
lights.
yeah, but the one that I saw used a battery operated one, which I
Mhm.
would probably prefer because I don't know how much that plastic would hold up if that tea light fell over, so
Yeah, that would
I
make me
vote battery
nervous
operated.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I that kind of ties into my next one. So I talked about this on our fall tips one, but finding low stress pumpkin decorating instead of
Hmm.
carving, because we talked about this, but carving a pumpkin and a jack-o'-lantern just like ends up not being a fun
Cannot.
activity for me. It just is more stressful. So I talked about the dried flowers, which I think we're going to do this weekend because
Oh,
we have
fun.
them all pressed and drying out right now. But you could paint them. I've seen other ones with like stickers or doing like just like a decoupage with different kind of fun Halloween fall artwork. So, and it doesn't even have to be pumpkins. If you want to do any other fun little crafts, which will be my last tip, but I'll save that. But yeah, looking for alternatives to something. And maybe you really enjoy carving pumpkins and that is cozy for you, but don't feel like you have to do something just because it's like a tradition or it's like
Yeah.
a popular activity. Which this is going to be a small tangent. Again, we are talking about weird things we did in the 90s. I feel, did you ever do like bobbing for apples?
I literally was about to change my second one to an Apple related thing, but I never, well, actually that's not true. I did when I was really little. I don't really get the why of it.
That was going to be my point. That feels like we're waterboarding children. Like, that's
but
not
like
a safe activity.
but like a DIY version because I'm choosing to stick my own head in here for like this apple, but I don't. But you never get like a good prize either. Like, what do I want? The apple? No.
Yeah. And it was always like you just have like you have to stick your head. Okay, if because I feel like this has literally gone away. So if anyone is listening,
Oh
I feel
yeah,
like we do have
100%.
quite a few younger-ish listeners. But if you never did bobbing for apples, we would have like a bucket or a bin of water with a bunch of apples, and apples float. And so
Yeah,
you would stick your head into the
yeah,
water and try to bite out the apple. But it would be hard because you'd have to like force the apple
yeah,
down to the bottom to be able to grab it. And you're just like inhaling all this water. You're going to drown. Like, what? And this was at like every kid's, and it was specifically Halloween parties, but it was like at
yeah.
parties all of the time. And
I don't know
I
where that
just
came from. Like,
like,
did someone think of it? Did it pop into a movie and we were all like, yes, that's a great activity for
right.
kids
And like, I
events? Like,
never
I don't know.
questioned it as a kid. I was like, oh yeah, bobbing for apples. But like now, just thinking about it, I'm like, what were we doing?
Yeah, I would have. The other one that actually would I do it again? Probably was we put donuts on a string and then you're trying to like eat the donut, but you can't use your hands, so you have the hands behind your back, so you're
Oh,
trying to like eat the donut, but you can't
I
let it
never
fall on the
did that
ground.
one.
So you're trying
I
to eat the
never did
whole
that one.
donut without it falling is the trick. But I'm like, that's a
Mhm.
donut. Shoot, I'd still do that.
Yeah, no, that seems less of a choking slash drowning hazard.
Yeah, so true. The one that I'm gonna change my second one to, it's so funny that you brought up apples, is I was thinking about when you're talking about carving pumpkins or not carving pumpkins, I feel like I kind of miss like a caramel apple. But
Mm.
I feel like a DIY caramel would probably be better because again, back in our childhood, I know they still exist, but this is what kind of killed caramel apples for me. Plus I had braces and I was like, "Bah, you're not supposed to
Aw.
have caramel." But it was just like this circular sheet of caramel that you would kind of ish warm up, mold over an apple, and then shove a stick into it. And I
Yes.
feel like a nice, like a DIY, kind of like a charcuterie board vibe
I've
thing.
seen where they do, like, the apple
Yeah.
bar with different, like, caramels or chocolates.
Hmm.
Yes.
I feel like that I am changing to my second tip because that's something that I kind of miss and I feel like would be really fun. It's kind of the fall slash Halloween vibes, but it's just kind of like a fun. You could do it as a girls' night. You could do it with kids. You
Mhm.
could do it in a bunch of different scenarios. Because I was thinking about yours when you were saying stickers about how like that would also be good for kids. Like kids could do that.
Yeah,
That wouldn't be too hard.
exactly.
Or adults could do it if you want to have like specific theme or something. So
For sure.
that's my
And
second one.
that actually gave me an idea that I think I'm gonna do like more of a savory because so we
Ooh.
got really into last kind of like fall Christmas of different baked brie combinations with like nuts or honey. And we've
Ooh.
been craving it so bad, but that's when it needs to be like colder out for. I don't know why. Like it just like hot gooey cheese. Like you don't want to be eating when it's still hot. So we've just been like waiting for cold weather so we can have brie. But I feel like apple and brie would be so
Yeah.
good as
Or
like
like
a
fondue.
combination. Mhm.
That would be so good. I feel like we're
Making
just
me hungry
creating.
now.
I know, so perfect. And then my third one is like a movie night at home. So I feel like we're
Yes.
just slowly adding it all up for that perfect, like cold evening, hopefully for you, movie night. So I feel like that's just a fun tip. That's kind of
Yeah,
more
and we
so what we
can
did on Halloween too. So,
yeah, that's definitely a preferred. I was gonna say we can put together kind of like we did for summer, but like a
hmm.
fall Halloween vibes movie watch list that we'll share too.
Yeah, so fun, so fun.
And then my last tip is kind of a plug, but we do have a Pinterest board. We don't talk about it too much on the podcast, but we have a Pinterest, not board, a Pinterest account. And we have a cozy Halloween board on there. So it has just even more cozy Halloween ideas, decorating vibes. So be sure to check it out and follow us there for all other kind of little fun, cozy ideas. But speaking of little cozy moments, what was your 2% for this week?
You actually already know this one, but I don't have it with me because it's downstairs, but I'll put a photo up. But you convinced me to get it. So it's a couple
Yes,
of days
I'm
ago. I
so
did get it.
excited.
I know. And the reason I got it is because I already have a place that I have a previous item that is that. Let me just tell you what it is and then it'll make more sense. I got two from the 90s bookends that feel
Love.
very Lorelei. One's like a teapot and the other's a little tea cup, I guess is what
Yeah,
it is,
a
with like a
cup and
little spoon.
saucer.
Yeah, cup and saucer. There you go. That's the word. I was like, I couldn't think of that. But I have bookends already that are okay, but aren't exactly my vibe. Whereas I feel like this is Lorelei slash Joy vibes of
Yeah, it's
things.
very
Like,
whimsical.
yeah, it is very whimsical. The reason I was hesitant on it is because the cup is chipped, but the way that I would put them on the bookshelf equals the chip being against the wall. So I
Yeah, you
feel like
couldn't
it'll
even
be
see
fine,
it. Hmm.
but I needed backup. I was standing, I got it at Goodwill, and I was standing in the Goodwill, and I was like, I don't know. Like I saw one, and then I found the other one in another aisle, and so I was like, okay,
Oh,
well now
that's
there's
like
a
a
set.
sign. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
So that was my 2% because
So
I feel like it really will
fun.
make my office a little bit more cozy, and I feel like right
Hmm.
now the bookends that I have is like it feels a little bit less my style than that. So I feel like having that section. It's also where I have my Hello Kitty Lorelai alarm clock. So I feel
Hmm.
like it'll just fit perfectly.
Yes,
What's your
love, love, love.
2%?
I'm so excited to see how they turn out though. Like you texted me and you're like, should I get these? And I was like, yes, absolutely, because I just thought they were so cute. But my 2% was very much of the theme of this episode.
Mm.
I made an autumn simmer pot with it was so good. I had cinnamon and cloves, and I know we talked about this recently, but the controversial cardamom, but it smells very good. So I
It
had
does.
that, some star anise. I sliced up an orange and put that in there.
So good.
This was a new thing that I added, but I really like the smell of like almond extract, but not
Ooh.
like a ton, just because it can be overbearing. But I put a few drops of that in there and just let that go all day, which is really nice. And then kind of in tandem, mine's like a two-part 2%. But I made this pumpkin chocolate chip bread that I hadn't
Yum.
in a few years. And like, I would, this was one of the first things I really like baked and made a lot of like in high school and college. And I hadn't made it in a few years. And I was like, I am making the bread this year. So I did it with my simmer pot going. So my house just smelled amazing with both of that going on. And it was like perfect fall vibes, even
Oh,
though it
love
was
it.
like 98 degrees outside.
I have a follow-up question for that. So this could be controversial. This could be just like kind of an either or. But when we did a recent for the Cozy Detectives Instagram live where
Hmm.
you came up with, we did it for the Gilmore Girls anniversary
Yeah.
on the 5th of this month, so October 5th. And you had came up with a lot of good either ors. And I just thought of one for this. Would
Ooh,
you
love,
rather
love, love.
have, right? Would you rather have like that version but a loaf or that version but muffins?
I knew that as soon as you said loaf, I was like, the other one's going to be a muffin.
Yeah.
That's tough.
It is tough.
I think, I guess it would depend on the size of the muffin because if it was like a
Mm.
smaller one, I would do muffin. Because I do love a good like crumble on top as well on a muffin.
Mm.
But like the Starbucks size muffins or like those like bakery, they're just so
Yeah.
big that it's just like overwhelming. But if it was like a little bit small, like a homemade size muffin, probably I would
Yeah.
go with that. And now I want to make pumpkin muffins.
I know, because I was thinking, oh, muffins. And then you said loaf, and I was like, ooh, I haven't made a loaf in a while. So
Hmm.
I'm like, ooh, a loaf sounds really good. Because just like a chunk of like a loaf of something, oh, so good.
Yes, agreed.
Mm.
But yeah, maybe we'll do a little cozy would you rather on an upcoming
Yeah.
episode. That could be fun.
I love that. I love that. I love that.
But speaking of more coziness, I will share some of our detectives 2%. Recently, I tried to find ones that were very kind of autumn vibes that people have sent in. So Lily Loves a Lit, which love that username,
Cute.
changed her lightweight summer sheets to her favorite flannel ones, which I know we talked about.
Love.
And I'm like, that is such a good little switch, getting into that perfect autumn coziness. And then our Lauren Melissa attended a yoga and journaling workshop with an autumn equinox theme, which sounded really fun. And then Maze 6991 got some apple and pear tea bags and said that they tasted and smelled very autumnal and cozy.
Ooh, I know. I would have never ever thought that pears are also in season during fall. But a few years ago, when I went to an apple orchard, there was also pear trees, and they were like perfectly ripe as well. So I
Yeah,
think
they
like
go
now
together.
Joy, yeah, they go together
Mm-hmm.
perfectly. So ooh, that sounds good. I like adding like one tea bag of this, one tea bag of that to like create the flavor that
Make a
you want.
blend. Ooh, fun.
Yeah, a little DIY blend action there. But
Love
also,
it.
if you have, as our cozy detectives, you are 2% cozy, this is your reminder to send that to us either at our Gmail, which is blanketfortfiles@gmail.com, or over on Instagram, which is blanketfortfilespod.
Yes. And then we are still asking for cozy
Oh, yeah.
travel tips. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, I think we started asking for those on our last episode, which in our world hasn't come out yet.
Yeah.
But this is just your reminder to send those in.
Yeah, send those to us. You don't have to give your specific location, or if you want to give a very specific location, then we're not going to include any usernames. So you're pretty clear to do that. But it's basically if cozy detectives were to visit your town, where would you suggest that they go? So that
Yeah.
is how that's good. And we're hoping to do a full episode on it potentially, or maybe half, depending on
How
this
many we
year's
get.
entries. But
Yes.
it'll be really
Looking
fun.
forward to getting some submissions
Me
once we
too.
finally release that episode. But
I know.
you can find us on Instagram at Blanket Fort Files Pod, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. It does help us out if you leave us a review, and you can join us next week in the Blanket Fort, where we're going to discuss the coziness of Halloween.
Halloween cozy.
Yes, and it's actually going to come out on Halloween, which will be very fun and good vibes.
Look at us go. Look at the timing of us.
Love it. So when it's on a Thursday.
We
We did it.
did it!